Okay, so 5 years after I was last here, Stephen, I'm back with Stephen Little, legendary rails bookmaker and now author of Stephen Little From Bicycle To Bentley, and we're going to talk about that and also a few questions 5 years after your first interview. So, why did you decide to write the book now?
Well, people have been telling me for a long time that I should write a book, and unfortunately, a lot of the potential buyers have died since. But eventually, Sir Rupert Mackeson, who you might have seen selling books and prints on various racecourses, who I've known for a long time through coursing, he eventually persuaded me that I should write a book.
And is it something that you said people sort of mentioned it to you before, but is it something you've ever seriously considered? Why was now the time right?
Well, I suppose I wanted to write it before it was too late and I was too senile to remember everything. I mean, years ago when I flew to Australia, I made quite a lot of notes about what might go in the book. That was over 20 years ago now. But I never followed that through.
And so you say Rupert Mackeson mentioned it to you. How much involvement has he had in it?
Well, he's given me advice on what to write, because I needed someone to tell me what's boring and what's not. So he's given me advice on basically the structure of the book, I suppose, and I've swapped things around, on his advice. But apart from that, all my own work, as they say.
Yeah, I understand you wrote it yourself. You didn't. A lot of people would go down the ghostwriting route. So why did you decide to do it that way?
Well, no ghostwriter emerged anyway, but I just prefer using my own words.
And how long have you been working on it?
I think I started, excuse me, towards the end of last year, so it was several months. But fortunately, I'd kept all my diaries, all my race cards, and all my ledgers, so that gave me something to refer to. I never remembered everything that's in there, without that.
Were there any stories that came back as you were looking through those ledgers that you'd forgotten about?
Not really, I don't think. No, nothing that springs to mind.
No, I read the book in one sitting, thoroughly enjoyed it. Sort of I was around in a totally different part of the ring than you, but for some of the period that it was based in. I was interested, a lot of your personality, I think, comes, well, you're the only person that knows, but a lot of your personality comes out in the book. I was interested that the number 147 haunts you after getting that score in a Latin exam from 150 when you were a schoolboy. Surely there must have been bigger numbers than that to haunt you since in your career as a bookmaker.
Not really, no. No, I mean the only other number that has the same effect, it doesn't haunt me exactly, but I remember it, is 113, which is the bus route that took us from Mill Hill to Hendon Central when I stayed with my grandparents and got the tube into London.
So not even anything from Frankie de Tory there or anything like that?
Not really, no. Well, 7, I suppose, but I wouldn't say that number haunts me particularly.
No, this I'm going to be a bit delicate with this because I don't want to give away some of the brilliant stories in this book, so I'm just going to skirt around, obviously having read it. One thing that struck me when reading it was how determined you've been throughout your life. There was a story about fixing a car, which I'll let people read with themselves. I mean, that in itself was astonishing. But so you decided during your gap year, you didn't go off to the beach. You you cycled around all the race courses in the country, cycled and stayed in youth hostels. I mean, tell us a bit about that.
Well, budget was very tight, as I think I've made clear in the book. So that cycling was the only form of transport I could afford, and youth hostels was the only accommodation I could afford. It's 3 and 6 a night, which is 17.5 pence. They were very basic. They were closed from 10 a.m. in the morning, so you had to be out by 10 a.m. and you couldn't get in till 5 o'clock. You couldn't stay in one for more than 3 nights running. They had every hostel had a closed day during the week, which varied. I had a sort of handbook to give me the details of all of them, all the hostels. 1 or 2 were purpose built, but they varied from virtually Nissen huts to castles even. Some didn't have running water, and some didn't even have electricity.
But I mean, some would see that cycling to all the racecourses in the country is a sort of a challenge that you'd look for sponsors to do rather than as something to...
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't think who would have sponsored me at that time when nobody had ever heard of me. Yeah.
Was it quite a lonely sort of thing? Did you like your own company, or did it just because nobody else wanted to come?
Well, I didn't mind being lonely. It's but quite because sometimes I used to stay with old school friends because I went to a boarding school. They were dotted around the country, so it was nice to see people, keep in touch with people that way. But sometimes I'd be away from home for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and without without seeing many people I knew. But and gradually I got to know people in the racecourse who'd see me all over the place. So no, I didn't really suffer that much from loneliness.
Did you have to sort of check in, ring home, and let everybody know you're okay during those?
Not particularly. I mean, I quite often did, but or sent postcards. But no, they didn't. My parents didn't keep particular tabs on me. They trusted me to look after myself.
And you were sort of quite fearless because you just decided to lock your bike up in Liverpool. Not saying that's the fearless bit, but then go across to Ireland.
Yeah.
You sort of do these things without any sort of trepidation.
Yeah. Well, that was just on a whim, really. I was at Haydock and on a Friday and Saturday. Well, on the Friday, intending to stay there for the Saturday as well, and just during the Friday I decided, well, I'll pop over to Ireland for a day at Leopardstown, just for the day. And I remember it was the wind against me from Haydock to Liverpool along the, I can't remember what the East Lancs Road is. I can't remember what the road's called. Lots of traffic lights, I remember, a dual carriageway even then. But it was a very tough journey against the wind, I remember that.
You mentioned in the book that you worked for bookmakers off course. So when did you first work on course?
That would have been in 1966. In the summer. I can't remember how I met him, but I worked for a bookie called Noel Ray from Harrogate. He was a rails bookie and had a few pitches, mostly in Yorkshire. And we went up to Ayr as well. So, I did odd days with him when he was out. So that was my introduction to racecourse, working on the racecourse.
I was interested that when you were working, not always when you were working, but when you were working and when you were just going to the races, that you were betting on the outcome of photo finishes. Yeah. And betting big odds on to quite big figures as well. Yeah. How did that come about?
Well, I think it was because I was talking to a professional punter called John Probert. He was quite a shrewd guy, and I said, well, I'd never liked to bet odds on, and he said, well, surely if there was a photo and you knew it had won, you'd bet odds on then. And that got me thinking that there was money to be made that way. So that's really what kicked that off.
And for me anyway, the most famous photo finish backer was Alec Bird, Kirby's book, which I read in the 80s.
Yeah.
Were you aware at the time, did you used to have like a stance like him and stand there on one leg with an eye closed and things like that?
No, I wasn't really aware of him. No, there were a few other regular photo finish punters. One was a guy called Mac. I never knew what his real name was, full name was. He was based in London, and there was Charlie Birch from somewhere in the Midlands. Then there were enough bookies betting on photos to, for us both to be involved. Often we'd be standing on the line together, and we'd go to different bookies.
And the mentality of the bookmakers back then, that they were quite happy to give away a score to you just to balance their book, just in case.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't always hedging. I mean, sometimes nobody really knew, including me. But sometimes it was very close. I'd want to take odds against, because even if it was a dead heat, you'd still make a profit. Or quite often it was not necessarily backing big odds on, but looking for the value. If it was very close, I'd back what I thought had won, even if I wasn't sure if the price was right.
Okay, now, interestingly for me anyway, you're talking later in the book that you became interested in bookmaker politics. With Eddie Baxter, On with Avalon.
Yeah.
It was bookmaker politics, or these bookmaker rules, that sort of pushed you into getting your rails pitches when you had some board pitches already.
Yeah, one or two, not very good pitches.
And you were working for the Thomas Henry Day firm.
Yeah.
Leaves from a Bookmaker's Books, another book worth reading if anybody can find one.
Yeah.
So then you were told by the Bookmakers Association that you couldn't represent him and have your pitches, so you decided to go it on your own.
Yeah, that's right.
In hindsight, was that a pivotal sort of moment in your career?
Yes, definitely, yes.
And you got those pitches in 1974?
Yes, round about then, yeah.
And the rails...
One or two came later than that.
Okay, so in the 70s, I understand it was quite poor in the 60s after betting shops opened. In the 70s, was the betting ring coming back? Because there was long waiting lists still to be a bookmaker in Tats.
Oh, in Tats, yes, ridiculously long. Yes, it wasn't really involved enough to compare the two periods, really. No, I don't know what the answer to that is, really. So
were there eyebrows raised by, because there were the gentlemen bookmakers on the rails, supposedly anyway, back in those days, were there eyebrows raised when Stephen Little turned up on his push bike with his secretary?
I think most people thought I was doomed to failure, yeah.
And would they have been supportive? Oh yes,
I mean, they thought I was doomed. I didn't think they wanted me to be doomed.
Right.